Hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. A little while ago, I accidentally ended up on a bit of a run reading stuff meant for like teens and young adults, that sort of thing, and frankly, I was craving something a little more grown up. I said as much at the end of one of my videos. I think it was the Cemetery Boys one, or it might have been Saint Hell, but either way, I had this comment with some recommendations on it. And I read Clara early on in my channel's life, but the other recommendation there was new to me. So today we are taking a trip to Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. And I want to start by thanking this commenter for telling me to read this book because, oh my goodness, I was hooked from the off. The imagery throughout is so vibrant, and it's clear that this book has so much heart in it, and Doerr certainly had mine in his grasp so early on, and I clocked that he could so easily break it. The book is separated into basically 3 points in time, following 5 different characters. We have Anna and Omer in 15th century Constantinople, Zeno and Seymour in Idaho in 2020, though we do learn a little of their lives before that point, and Constance in the somewhat distant future on a spacecraft seeking a new world post-climate crisis. And that's literally a new world, a new planet. In a way, they're all connected by a book called Cuckoo Land by Antonius Diogenes. And I love the way that Doerr connects them all with this story and reflects that tale in each character. I love when authors know how to write an ode to books and storytelling, and he does so beautifully here. For Anna and Omer, there's magic in stories, and that's reflected through the book by this book, not the book in the story. Like the book that I have read, that's reflected via owl imagery, a clear allusion to the goddess Athena. And that magic is not always a positive. There is a scene where Anna's sister is punished for the stories that are in their room, and her sister ends up with some kind of, I believe it's like a brain damage or like a concussion issue because of this punishment. Basically, she is dragged through their work and living space, and at one point her head collides with a stone wall, and it doesn't have to be described in minute detail for it to feel viscerally real, and it's a moment that's stuck with me ever since reading it. But the magic that's there for Omer and Anna is so beautiful because it is not necessarily a case of, oh, this is definite like mystical magic. It's more sort of the way that magic appears with a lot of people who I sort of understand the way they practice it. I've spoken about this before. Magic in a sort of, let's say, modern Wiccan sense is often more looking for signs and that kind of thing, and that is how it is portrayed for these two. Now, Seymour is less directly connected to Diogenes' story, but he is super connected to the owls, and they serve as a sort of guide to him, for better and for worse. He's an autistic teenager who struggles intensely with sensory overload, but manages to find solace in a patch of green land behind his and his mother's double wide. And he is enamoured by an owl that's there that he calls trusty friend, but eventually a new housing lot takes over the place, and he loses that space. He loses the green space. And at some point, despite the fact that his mother has told him, no, the owl's probably gone to find some other place, you know, they're intelligent birds, trusty friend is found dead, and this kind of leads him down the path. At first, it just seems like he's going to become a sort of run-of-the-mill eco-warrior type, but it takes a dark turn, however, when he becomes obsessed with a radical group, eventually leading him to take a bomb to the library. And while the library isn't the target, it's the easiest way for him to get to the place that is. And we know this part before knowing any of the eco story, and I knew that Doa had the power to crush me because he had me so warm and fuzzy before then, only to let me know that he can make me suffer. I'll keep spoilers out of things as best I can. Obviously that's not going to be perfect, but the way that owls are tied back into the end of his story is beautiful, and another of the sort of subtle magics in the book. And I think the thing with him is that at first, learning about him, it felt like it was going to be a bit of his fixation or special interest, whatever it would be, sort of categorized as, felt at first like that was going to be the reason that he becomes a bomber, like, oh, he's autistic, therefore he becomes a bomber and a shooter. And I was nervous about that, but it is actually played really well with the sort of cultish tactics used to lure him into performing the act that he does, because he is more sort of vulnerable to that kind of thing, and they play into it really well. I was nervous, but I think for me it's done pretty well. Now, like I said, magic isn't strictly speaking a thing here, but it does feel like it throughout. There are these little moments where it seems as though there is just this mystical feeling all around in these discreet little ways. Diogenes' story may be fictional, but it feels as though it does hold power throughout the book, and it certainly feels like Athena has her watchful eye over everything. It's just stunning, and that is really brought together by every little sigil of owls and that kind of thing. Zeno is an elderly man leading a production of Cuckoo Land with a small group of 5th graders in the library. On the night that Seymour brings the bomb downstairs in the library, this group is upstairs for their final dress rehearsal. Throughout the book, we see Zeno grow from a boy to the man we see in 2020 Idaho. He has a love for stories, and he discovers from a relatively young age he also has a love for men. And of course, this isn't exactly something he can be too open about, so for the most part it remains something he keeps very close to his chest. But during the Korean War, he's in a prisoner of war camp and meets a man called Rex. Before the war, Rex studied and taught Greek and had a fascination for bringing it to life. It's a hard language to translate because of multiple meanings, and there's obviously nobody to really defer to that authentically speaks it outside of scholars who study and argue over it. The two of them connect over this, and it's clear that the two of them fall for each other, even if they never explicitly state as much. And in a roundabout way, it's this meeting that leads Zeno to want to translate Cuckoo Land, a story that had only ever been alluded to for the longest time. The magic of this translation transcends decades, even without ever strictly speaking being published. And finally, we have Constance. She was born on a ship called the Argos, which is on its way to a new world after the Earth has been ravaged by climate change. However, a disease somehow manages to spread its way around the ship, and Constance's father manages to seal her away in one of the vaults, but that leaves her as basically the sole survivor on there, and I believe she's only about 13 or 14. Look, there's a lot going on in this book. I think you can forgive me for not being exact on her age there. But on this ship, there are these things called perambulators, which, side note, I'm pretty sure that's the full word for pram, as in the thing for babies. Anyway, this perambulator gives them access to the library, where those on the ship can access a whole host of information. It's basically a virtual space, and they can go in there, they can drop a piece of paper into a box with, if they put a question on the box, it's basically like using Google, but what happens is you write your question on the piece of paper, you drop it into basically like a suggestions box, and anything with that information comes to you from the library. It's really cool. But in this library is the Atlas, which basically functions like if Google Maps was done VR style. And it's here where Constance spends most of her time, especially later on, she uses it to connect to her father, who, as you might expect, she's basically grieving for. She has no idea if anybody has survived outside the vault, and Sybil, who's the ship's computer, will not let her out, just in case there is any present danger. But she manages in this atlas to find where her father lived before joining the Argos, and while she can't enter the home, there are some details she can make out, and she sees in one of the windows a copy of Cuckoo Land by Antonius Diogenes, this version translated by Zeno. However, the library doesn't have any record of such a book existing. This basically sets Constance off on a quest to find this book and the story that her father has told her throughout her life, and this leads her to discovering so much more than just that. Again, the presence of owls in this atlas is used so well, and that ties back to other characters, and I think just that's done incredibly well. And throughout, like I said earlier, Doerr just had my heart in his hands, and he could do with it as he pleased. While I never bawled my eyes out, I was close at times. The final sort of few chapters, I would say the last sort of 150 pages really just got me, because we've grown so connected to these characters. Even Seymour, in a way, while he is obviously not the most favourable, is very clear that he was being taken advantage of, and it's just so heartbreaking when we get to the end, because there's still hope in it because of the way things are done. And I love the way everything's interconnected through different eras. My favourite thing, I will not spoil this, but my favourite thing is the whole order of the folios within Cuckoo Land. That's very good, and I love that dearly. But I love a good ode to storytelling, and I also love character-driven narrative, so it does feel like this book was frankly made for me. Everything is so utterly vibrant, and I can see myself returning to it in the future. Though it is somewhat of a, it's a pretty long book, it felt nice to just slowly make my way through it and savour it. I cannot recommend this book highly enough, and thank you to the commenter who put this recommendation out there to me, because it is delightful. Personally, I wish I could just spend more time with it, even though it's already massive. I want to spend more time with these people. I want to know every little detail, and just, goodness. But I don't think that's a bad thing. This isn't like I should have had more. It's just that I want more, because of course I do. And I think that's always a high praise for a good book, is I want to spend more time with the people that you've given to me. But next week we should be on The Chrysalids by John Wyndham, which I'm very much looking forward to. I just need to find it, because I've been rearranging my room. But to make sure you can catch that and more, feel free to feel free to subscribe, and feel free to ring that notification bell. All the cringe shit I'm supposed to ask you to do in my videos. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.